Like a gleaming flame on the eastern horizon, the Palace of the Sun towered over the earth below, a sight both exhilarating and fearsome. Its immense double doors shone with plates of silver, and its sculpted pediments glistened with ivory, mounted on columns reaching high into the heavens. Its roof, tiled with gold and bronze, cast brilliant light in all directions, a coating of molten fire over the palace's high peak. This was the domain of the immortal sun, the god of irresistible radiance, of unquenchable fire, who each day traversed the sky in his flaming four-horsed chariot, from east to west, from dawn to dusk, blessing the whole world with his light. So brilliant was the sight of the palace that the lone wanderer gazing upon it, the young Phaethon, was forced to shield his eyes. He had traveled through all of Ethiopia and India to the far edges of the earth to discover this secret stronghold. As the boy looked on, his blood quickened. This was the place Phaethon had dreamt of, where his destiny lay. This was the great hall of the sun, his immortal father. It was months ago, in Egypt, that he bid his mother goodbye and set off to the east in search of his father. It all began with the boasts of a friend. Epaphus was the son of the mortal woman Io, and the king of all the gods, the mighty Zeus. After Io's arduous journeys had brought her to the land of Egypt, it was here that her son Epaphus, child of Zeus, had met the young Phaethon. Phaethon, too, according to the tales of his mortal mother Clymene, had the blood of a god in his veins, as the child of the brilliant sun. Epaphus was proud of his lineage from Zeus, a fact he never let anyone forget. But Phaethon, being equally proud, was not to be outdone. And at this Epaphus mocked him. "You really think you're the son of a god? What proof do you have to show for it? Nothing but the words of your mother, a bunch of lies." Epaphus's challenge had stung Phaethon to his core. It was, after all, the truth. He had no proof that his father was an immortal god except his mother's stories. Embarrassed, humiliated, and frustrated, he returned home to his mother Clymene and told her what Epaphus had said. "Mother, I was shamed," Phaethon said, "because he was right. I have no proof that I'm the son of a god. It burned me to have no answer to beat back his insults with. You have to give me proof. I have to know for sure that the sun is my real father." He embraced his mother in a tight hug and begged her to give him the answers his bold spirit was craving. Clymene heard her son's pleas as she stroked his red hair, and knew in her heart that the boy needed to discover the truth for himself. She turned her face upward to the radiant sun in the sky, and reached upward with her arms, and said to Phaethon, "My son, I swear by the sun itself, the sun that looks down upon the earth and sees everything, including you and I here, the sun that rules every land, the sun you're looking at right now. I swear by this sun that he is your true father. And if I'm telling a lie, may I never see this sun again but be struck dead and lose the light of the living. But if you need more proof than I can offer, you, Phaethon, you can visit the sun in his palace yourself. If you're daring enough, you must go far to the east, and the land where he rises, where you can ask your father himself every question you have." And so, his eastward journey now finished, Phaethon gazed upon the huge frame of his father's palace, the place where all his answers resided. He approached the gargantuan silver doors, decorated by Hephaestus himself, god of the forge. They were masterfully engraved with scenes of the blue sea and the land, teeming with life through the blessings of the sun. Above these were set the stars in the sky, the great scorpion, the crab, the bull. 12 signs in all, 6 on the right door and 6 on the left. Marveling at everything he saw, but still burning to venture further in, Phaethon put his hands to the immortal silver doors and pressed against them. A blast of warm air greeted Phaethon's face as the doors parted, and he squinted his eyes as they were flooded with a glorious golden hue that emanated from within the palace. He stepped forth into the great hall, its ceiling too high to be seen by his mortal eyes, its thick columns lining the path forward on each side. Ahead, and up a steep flight of stairs, was the center of the light, the throne of his immortal father. His passion blazed, and his heart was in his throat as he hastened on, so near to the goal. He mounted the stairs. With each step, the light and heat became more intense, forcing the boy to again shield his eyes with his hand. He approached the center of the light, discerning through its sheer brilliance a high throne, and seated upon it, the image of a man. The light was too strong. Phaethon was forced to stop at a distance, trying his hardest to glimpse his father's form. There Phaethon's father sat majestically, the great light personified, clothed in purple robes upon a throne glittering green with inlaid emeralds. Flanking the throne atop the stairs stood the gods' courtiers, the divinities' day, month, year, and century, and each of the hours, and the 4 seasons beside them. Beautiful spring wore a crown of woven flowers. Summer carried ears of grain harvested from rich fields. Autumn's feet were stained from stomping the grapes in the annual vintage, and winter glowered, grim and gray, with icy locks of hair. Phaethon looked on in wonderment on this company of immortal spirits, and the luminous sun in the form of a man, sitting at their center. He hesitated, waiting with bated breath as the god and his court leveled their gazes at him. And the sun was first to speak. "Why have you come to my sanctuary?" Though his form was too luminous for Phaethon to see clearly its source, he felt the god's calm but authoritative voice vibrate through the very air in the great hall. He feared the sun's displeasure at his trespassing, but was reassured when the voice spoke again, this time with his own name. "Phaethon, what do you seek here? I know your face. How could the all-seeing sun not know your face? You are my child." Phaethon felt a wave of relief ripple through him, and he answered back, stirred by his father's welcome but still aware of whom he was addressing. "O mighty sun, light of all the world, father, if I may call you that. My mother is Clymene, and I have journeyed here to know for sure that you are my real father, and I am your real son." A tense moment passed as Phaethon awaited the great god's reaction. Still shielding his eyes against the brilliance of light personified, he made out the form of the enthroned god raising his arms to his head. The immortal courtiers stepped away from the throne. A moment later, Phaethon felt the emanating heat against his body diminish, the great hall dim a little, and the blinding light give way. The sun had removed his radiant crown, and now stood to greet the boy, plainly approachable and fully visible, a god in the shape of human perfection, his purple robes pristinely dazzling. His eyes were kind, and his countenance friendly. "Come here, Phaethon. I wouldn't deny that you are my son. Clymene has told you the truth." He motioned for Phaethon to move closer, and opened his arms to receive him. Phaethon was overcome, with the thrill of encountering a god, with the satisfaction of his parentage, with the joy of their reunion here, at the far reaches of the mortal realm, and with pride at the indisputable truth that he, the child of the sun, was a demigod. Abandoning caution, he stepped forward and buried himself in his father's embrace. The immortal god went on, "My son, I don't want you to suffer any doubts that I am your father. So today I will grant you anything at all your heart desires, as only a god can do. I promise you this, and hereby swear by the dark Styx, the river of the world below, an unbreakable oath for us gods. Tell me only the gift you wish for." Phaethon stepped back, astonished, his eager mind racing. To choose but one gift among countless possibilities might have caused another man, perhaps a man older and wiser with years, to think long and deeply. But not Phaethon. Within his young soul, daring and hot with enthusiasm, the ember of a long-held fantasy stirred to life. For as long as his mother Clymene had told him of his father's identity, he had gazed at the wide sky above and the blazing orb within it, with a deep desire. As the sun glided across the heavens each day, he knew with a swelled chest that he was watching his father's glorious work. And he imagined the splendor of the sun standing fast in his chariot, guiding the horses with divine hands, flying through the vault of heaven, bringing light to the whole world. He had journeyed here and learned for certain his true nature as a demigod. He had the blood of a god running through his own veins, and he yearned for a taste of his father's matchless glory. He spoke up in an instant, meeting his parents' eyes. "Father, since you swore on the Styx to give me anything I ask for, I'll tell you what I want. My desire is to drive your chariot, the glorious chariot of the sun, and take over your task for a day. I want to see what it feels like to be my father and do the work of a mighty god." As the sun personified looked down at his young child, his eyes sank from pride to worry. The cloud of regret passing over him was visible on his face. He had sworn on the river Styx, and now his son was asking for the one thing that a parent would never dare to permit. "Son," he began, delicately but resolutely, "what you're asking has made me realize my haste in making such a promise, and I wish I could take it back. This is the one gift, I admit, that I would never, ever grant you. But I cannot revoke an oath by the river of the dead. So now, Phaethon, listen carefully to what I will tell you, and let me persuade you against what you ask of me. This task is beyond your strength and your age. You are only half god, my son, and your fate is mortal. Not even the other gods are able to do my work. Only I can mount the chariot's flaming wheels. Not even Zeus, greatest of all the gods on Olympus, can do this. And what god is mightier than he? When I step into the chariot, the steeds race from their stables up into the sky, flying a steep course into the air, and the journey is barely accomplished, even by my team. At the midpoint of the heavens, my whole body seizes with cold fear if I look down upon the land and seas below. So far above this world do I ascend. At the journey's end, I careen steeply downward, faster than Zeus's lightning, hurtling toward the open sea that keeps her arms open for me, lest I fail to turn my team and shatter against the waves. As I travel through the gleaming lights of the highest sky, I must fight with all my force to resist the pull of heaven's spinning ceiling, which moves the stars in their courses. Let me ask you, son, how do you think you would resist the heavens' vault, if the chariot were in your hands? Would you manage to stay your course, or be swept away by its pull into black oblivion? Maybe you think there's much to see up there in the vast air. Rich sanctuaries and cities of gods to behold? Don't be fooled. There's only danger up there, like the shapes of savage beasts that lurk among the stars. You'll have to watch out for Taurus's sharp horns, the arrows of Sagittarius, Leo's gaping jaws, and the deadly arms of Scorpio and Cancer that sweep across your path. And I've left out the horses themselves, breathing flames that draw my chariot, who throw their necks and resist my control at every turn, nearly shaking free of the yoke. Son, I want you to hear me. This gift, were I to give it, would be no gift at all. Change your mind while you still can. If it's the guarantee of my parentage you really want, my boy, you're seeing it in the care I have for you right now. Look at my face and see my fear. I only wish you could see in my own heart the worries of a father. Ask for anything at all on earth, in the sea and in the sky, and you shall have it. But this wish alone I beg you not to ask. It is no gift as you think, but a torment. But young Phaethon was utterly unmoved. He thought only of his father's glory, a glory he so admired that he wanted it for himself. And he trusted in his own powers as the heir of the mighty sun. The father kept protesting, but to no avail. My son, my foolish son, I am bound by the waters of the Styx. I shall grant you what you wish, if only you had wished more wisely. And so the son led Phaethon through his eternal palace to the stable, where the chariot and team waited. The chariot, another of Hephaestus's masterpieces, stood magnificently in the middle of the stone floor, glistening gold in its frame and axles, its wheels fitted with silver spokes. It was a lordly vessel, a wonder as radiant as its master. As Phaethon marveled at this chariot, the goddess of the dawn, immortal Eos, awoke in her eastern home, opened her purple doors and her rosy chambers. Morning was coming, a new day beginning, and Phaethon's time was nigh. The sun observed the reddening of the earth and the vanishing horns of the crescent moon, and he ordered his attendant hours to ready the 4 fire-breathing steeds. This they did quickly, and yoked the team to the golden car. The father, still regretful, took his son aside and smeared Phaethon's face with a sacred ointment to protect him from flame, then placed his brilliant crown upon the boy's head. He sighed with concern, placed his immortal hands on Phaethon's shoulders, and gave him his best advice on managing the course and governing the horses. No need to lash the team, for they move fast enough on their own. You need only to rein them in, and avoid the north and south poles, and fly too close to neither the earth below nor the upper sky above. Keep to the middle course, avoiding the extremes. But now he saw that the shadows were fleeting, and dawn had fully arrived. My boy, take the reins now, if you can't listen to reason, he commanded. But if you can, take my advice, and not my chariot. Once your feet leave the ground, there's no chance for second thoughts. But Phaethon, feeling like a real god in his father's crown, flushed with pride, was beyond any persuasion. He loved and admired his father, but dismissed his fears. Like any parent, the son was too careful to protect him. He, Phaethon, had the blood of a god in his veins, and he would prove his worth to his father and to himself. His destiny lay in the golden chariot, and in the vast reaches of the whirling skies. With no further delay, he jumped into the chariot, gripped the reins, and gave a word of thanks to his father. The 4 horses, whinnying and snorting fire, felt the pull of the charioteer and took off at full gallop, bursting through the gates of the palace stable and climbing swiftly into the air, driving upward into the purple sky as Phaethon held on with white knuckles. The wind whipped his face and his red hair, and he turned his head to look below as the land and seas shrank behind him with incredible speed. The sight caused Phaethon's heart to hammer, and cool dread to seep through his limbs. But he pressed on, turning back to his work and sternly grasping the reins. How far he had come, he thought in an instant, from those days in Egypt when Epaphus had refused to respect his divine ancestry, when his mother had consoled him with her promises. But even as he tightened his grip on the reins, he soon realized that he was not in control. The 4 wild horses could sense the weight and strength of their driver, and didn't recognize the steady mastery of their lord. And so each of the 4 tested Phaethon, pulling against the yoke, whinnying fiery gusts of air from their nostrils, jerking the car and driver now up, now down, to the right and to the left in raucous motions. Phaethon panicked, as he found in the chariot's reins no power to handle the team. His body tossed furiously, his head whipped as the chariot was borne further and further off its course, and he felt pure dread in his quaking bones. Even if he could regain control of the horses, he knew he could never recover the proper course through the open air. And so the flaming chariot veered across the vault of heaven, off course. Helpless, Phaethon again glimpsed the safety of land far, far below him. The color drained from his face. His knees shook underneath him. And now he regretted that he had ever set foot on the golden chariot, that he had ever journeyed in search of his father, that he had discovered the truth of his parentage. For all these were sealing his doom. Flying through the stars in the outer blackness, he saw firsthand the gargantuan beasts his father had warned him of. He lay eyes on the vast arms of Scorpio, and watched in silent dread as its venomous tail arched up, the spike on its tip leveled at the chariot and prepared to strike. He let go the reins to shield himself, and the horses, now free of all restraint, careened out of the scorpion's path. The chariot swung loosely behind them, crashing against the stars in the sky and breaking them out of their courses. Still, Phaethon, in utter terror, clung for his life to the chariot's tattered frame. The fiery team rushed upward, straight up into the empty air, then arched and hurtled downward, headlong toward the earth with immeasurable speed. From afar, the pale moon looked on with surprise as her brother's chariot whizzed through space, passing through clouds and setting those clouds aflame in its path. And down toward the earth and the sea came the chariot with its eternal fire and its withering heat. The earth bellowed a cry as the sun set mountain tops on fire, as the trees and leaves wasted into ashes. Mount Athos was burning, and Mount Tmolus, and Mount Helicon, and Mount Parnassus. Mount Ida's cool springs evaporated. Mount Etna belched forth its volcanic flames with doubled intensity. Olympus's forests were consumed, and those of the Alps and the Apennines. Great cities were demolished, their walls blasted into rubble. Tracts of land were ravaged by fire. Careening to and fro, holding no single course, the sun's power devastated west and east, north and south. The river Euphrates burned, and the Ganges, and the Danube, and the 7 mouths of the Nile were choked with ash. The waters of the Rhine and the Tiber dried to a trickle. Phaethon gazed down in horror on the face of the earth, a field of flames and black smoke and ashes as far as his eyes could see. and he himself was enveloped in a cloud of heat and smoke as the chariot itself began to be consumed by the fierce sun. Every breath he took seethed his throat, and the chariot's frame scorched his hands and feet. As the soil of the earth dried, hardened, and cracked under the heat, gaping fissures opened the land, revealing the dark underworld below, and exposing it to unwelcome light. In the kingdom of the dead, Hades and Persephone fled their thrones in terror. The seas began to shrink as the ocean steamed into vapor, and new islands were revealed as the waves sank down. Poseidon raised his damp head above the surface, but 3 times was forced down by the heat of the looming sun. Giant Atlas struggled to hold the globe of the world on his shoulders, so hot had it become. And now Mother Earth tried to shelter her children, and unable to bear the fires longer, called upon Zeus, the father of gods and men. "Do you care nothing for me and my earth, or your brother and his seas, or the heavens above? Why do you hold back your lightning now? Lest all the world slide back into chaos, use your power, end this danger, and keep us all from the fire." With that, her voice gave out as Mother Earth coughed smoke from her lungs. And Zeus on Olympus heard her words and took them to heart. He consulted the other gods, including the god whose son and chariot they were, and all concluded grimly what had to be done. Without delay, Zeus sprang forth from Olympus, took a position high in the peak of the sky, drew forth a thunderbolt in his crackling hands, and took aim at the wild chariot, now a swerving wreck fully engulfed in flames, the doomed Phaethon still clutching the rails. Zeus drew his arm back past his ear and hurled the swift bolt of lightning that met and shattered its target into 1,000 shivering pieces. The horses slipped free and ran wild as fragments of the chariot littered the land and sea. Phaethon's seared body was flung from the fiery wreckage, and his soul departed to the world below. The boy's flaming red hair and the trail of smoke that followed him traced a line through the air like a falling star. As all the cosmos breathed relief and began to heal its wounds, Phaethon's body was received by the nymphs who inhabit the Italian waters of the river Po. With gentle hands, they cooled and washed his body, still smoldering from Zeus's almighty lightning, and they prepared him for a burial worthy of an immortal god's own child. The sun himself, the regretful father, shrouded his lordly head in sorrow for an entire day, a day on which the sun did not rise. And Clymene, when she heard of Phaethon's fate, wandered the earth, grieving and seeking his remains. One day she arrived in Italy, at the banks of the river Po, and found there a noble tomb erected by the nymphs in his honor. The mother clasped the monument and dampened with flowing tears the inscription chiseled into its stone face, the final testament to the bold child of the radiant sun. Here lies Phaethon, who could not hold his father's chariot. Greatly he failed, but greatly did he dare. Welcome, folks, to Behind the Story for the Tale of Phaethon, another perennial favorite from Greek mythology. The popularity of this story definitely relies a lot, I think, on the kind of vivid imagery that you get, how it really captures the imagination, this daring ride through the cosmos. So it's no surprise that a lot of visual representations try to capture the ride and the fall of Phaethon as well. It's a popular subject of a lot of paintings. And of course, the moral messages in the story are pretty close to the surface, about basically not biting off more than you can chew, and knowing your limits. We'll talk just a bit here about the lessons of this myth, and some other topics too. Now, to pick up on what I was just talking about, not all myths have a clear message, but this one does seem to. And the particular takeaway from the Phaethon story is an idea that was really prominent in ancient Greek thought, the idea of knowing your limits and not trying to go too far. This is all the more true when it comes to gods. Mortals should absolutely not try to compete with gods. That will only result in your destruction, and there are plenty of myths that tell this kind of story. Phaethon is a demigod, but he's young, and the situation he gets into stands for a kind of coming-of-age story, in which he sadly does not pass the test, and his life is ended before its time. It's all about him failing to know his limits and letting his desire for glory take over, glory like a god, which he is not, at least fully. Another story like this is the myth of Icarus, which you might also know, where Daedalus and his son Icarus escape from the island of Crete. They have wings that are bound together with wax that they're going to use to fly across the water to freedom. And Icarus flies too close to the sun, which ends up melting his wax, ruining his wings, and he ends up crashing down into the ocean to his death. He's young, he's headstrong, he's flying too high, he's not paying attention to the limitations of his flying ability with these wings. And the plummeting to his death is very, very similar to what happens here to Phaethon. There too you have a father figure, in that case Daedalus, who is warning Icarus, just like the sun does to his son Phaethon. But the tragic outcome is the same. The idea of pushing past your limits can be viewed as a kind of reckless arrogance, this belief that you can do things far beyond your powers as a mortal. A related concept among ancient Greeks is hubris, a word that's still around in English and refers to this reckless, overreaching arrogance. When someone in ancient Greek literature has this hubris, you know pride cometh before the fall, and they probably won't have a happy ending. It's also worth mentioning in connection with this the famous saying that was inscribed on the wall of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, "Know thyself, gnothi auton." These were foundational words of wisdom, widely quoted around Greece, and knowing yourself meant knowing what you were and were not capable of, helping you avoid hubris and not suffer the consequences. This kind of humble, honest self-knowledge, especially when it comes to mortals attempting to rival gods, is what Phaethon's story really meditates on. He's an example of the cost of hubris. So, Phaethon's story is told in a few different places, but this one is adapted from Ovid's Metamorphoses, a source of plenty of other videos on the channel. Ovid is a Roman poet, and he's always a good storyteller, because he has such a human touch with his characters, and I tried to inject some of that into this retelling too. Phaethon is really relatable in some ways. He just wants to do his best and prove himself. He's also sympathetic, being just a young guy who's still not aware of his limits and doesn't have the maturity to put aside his headstrong desires and take his father's advice. He really wants so badly to prove himself that it ends up getting him into trouble. This is a coming-of-age story, in which the attainment of age is lost, as the protagonist doesn't survive the trials of adolescence. All of us growing up make mistakes, but the mistakes typically don't have as high a price as poor Phaethon's do here. Speaking of Phaethon's father, by the way, the god of the sun in ancient mythology has a few different identities and names, depending on the particular author or time period a given version of the story comes from. So the sun is sometimes connected to Apollo, sometimes regarded as one and the same god. And this figures into Apollo's association with the sun, just as his sister Artemis is associated with the moon. Roman poets will refer to Apollo and/or the sun god with the name Phoebus or Phoebus, which denotes his role as god of the sun. But there's also another figure named Helios, especially earlier in Greek myth, who is a separate god. He's literally just the physical personification of the sun, and the name Helios in Greek is just the Greek word for the sun. He's the one who drives the chariot each day to make the sun come up and go down, just like in Ovid's story in the Metamorphoses. And for his part, in the original Latin, Ovid just refers to Phaethon's father as Sol, which is the Latin word for the sun, where we get words like solar, for instance. So this is more like the Roman/Latin equivalent of Helios, the Greek personification. Phaethon's father for Ovid is this personification of the sun. And that will do it for the tale of Phaethon. Just a few extra comments on this story. Thank you very much for checking in, and please let me know if there are any other thoughts or questions or connections that come to mind for you. Have a terrific rest of your day, see you in the next one, and remember, well, the lesson here is obvious. Know thyself.